Hey guys, welcome to AP US History. We are talking about Chapter 24 and the New Deal. This is the first of a two-part video series on the New Deal. We're going to be breaking this up to make it more manageable for you guys so we can address different topics as we go through this chapter. One of the things you want to note as you read or as you are continuing your reading is to make sure that you can answer the following questions in your mind. First, what were the goals of the New Deal? All right, what were the goals of the New Deal? Second, were the programs of the New Deals successful? All right, and third, did the New Deal end the Great Depression? Think about those three questions as you go through your reading and be able to explain and back up your reasoning to answering those questions. That will show you a better understanding. Now, one of the highlights that we're going to be talking about, well, rather two of the highlights that we're going to be talking about in this video is the launching of the New Deal as well as the New Deal in transition. All right, guys, so before we go into some of the specifics from the textbook, we want to note the three R's of the New Deal. Now, when we say the three R's, you're not going to see this expressly said in your textbook or even possibly in your AP test, but it is a good memory tool when you think about what the goals of the New Deal are. So you remember that first question we talked about. This is going to help you guys answer that. The first being the goal of relief. Can we relieve the problems that the country is facing at this current time period, i.e., unemployment, lack of production, low GDP? Okay. Can we reform or change the problems that led to this depression? We're going to see this in evidence of trying to reform the banks, reform the stock market, reform our government's policies toward industry. And the third being recovery. Now that we've provided relief so people aren't spiraling, we've created some stability. Now that we've been able to fix the problem so it doesn't happen again, how do we recover and return back to where we were prior to 1925? I'm sorry, 1930, 1925, we were having the time of our lives in the Roaring Twenties. All right, now when we talk about the launching of the New Deal, we have to talk about Roosevelt's personality. Roosevelt was a great orator, a great speaker, and he accomplished a lot of his goals of explaining his programs via his fireside chats. He was one of the first presidents to effectively use the radio and other public communications to reach the masses of people. And it's really important to note that when we talk about FDR, so if you see things about FDR and his presidency, you do want to note his personality as far as one of his character traits. Now, the big thing about FDR in the start of his New Deal was about restoring confidence in the American people, specifically confidence to spend their money. This comes with the bank holiday, which was a 4-day holiday for the banks, allowing the banks a chance to recover, not have to worry about giving away so much money, and it really gave the people a chance to relax and not panic so much. Remember, one of the big problems of the Great Depression was the panicking that ensued when things started to go south. Prohibition being repealed is another aspect of his presidency. I'm not sure it's going to be something that's going to be major in the AP test, but it should be important to note that FDR was the president to end prohibition. Now, when we talk about some of the early programs, again, launching the New Deal, President Roosevelt and his advisors looked at who they needed to help out first. And one of the early programs and one of the early areas that they realized they needed to help was in the agricultural region. With the Agricultural Adjustment Bureau, they realized they needed to help local farmers be able to get back on their feet. If you remember during our discussion on the Roaring Twenties, not everybody prospered during that time period, especially the farmers. Now, the AAA was known primarily for their farming subsidies. In fact, they were paying farmers not to produce as much as they possibly could and covering what they would have sold if they were able to produce their full amount. What the goal was with those subsidies was to be able to decrease the amount of farm goods in the market, thereby raising the price of those goods. More higher price in goods means the manufacturers or the producers can make more money, and that way they can employ more people. Another goal was rural electrification, essentially trying to bring easy, cheap electricity to these farms. A lot of that is done with the help of the TVA and other administrative programs, but we're going to get to that later on. Also, we need to note that one of the other goals in the launching of the New Deal was industrial recovery. How do we fix the industrial aspects or the industrial part of our economy? With the National Recovery Act in Section 7A, which you read in your textbook, there was a deal struck with bosses and unions to try to set minimum wage limits, hours limits, to be able to get the maximum amount of people working for the most amount that they could without unions possibly going on strike or others to try to make more money. So a loose, kind of edgy deal being made between those two groups with the National Recovery. Now, as I said before, one of the goals in the farming industry was to bring cheap electricity and other utilities to the farming region. One example that is important to note is the Tennessee Valley Authority, which was in charge of providing hydroelectricity to the Tennessee region. Also important to note is the reform aspect of those three R's, in which they sought to change their policies in regards to the banks and the stock market, as well as how they treated money. In your textbook, you'll note that the government does away with the gold standard during this time period and really works on their ability to move the value of our currency up and down, and to really see what is the best in return in regards to our monetary policy. The Glass-Steagall Act is a act that was meant to reform banks and speculation. Speculation essentially is aggressive and risky money tactics that were used to try to make a profit, such as investments in very risky ventures, which would often lose money, but for those that were successful, would gain a lot of money. The Glass-Steagall Act severely regulated the amount of speculation or the types of speculations that banks could get into, thereby saving a lot of the employers or employees during that time period. It also saved the American people who put their money in those banks, so they knew that their money wasn't going to be lost. There wouldn't be any bank failures. The other part of the Glass-Steagall Act was to try to really regulate and limit some of the weaker banks, those that really couldn't handle the speculation at that level without going under, and it really strengthened some of the stronger banks. If you think about J.P. Morgan, he would be one of the stronger areas or stronger banks. The Security and Exchange Commission, or SEC, you guys should probably be more familiar with. They are still more so seen in mainstream media today. They help regulate the stock market to make sure that things like buying on margin doesn't happen, to make sure that problems in the stock market don't happen to the degree with which that they happened in the Great Depression. We're still going to have problems in the stock market. That's just part of finance, but the SEC was meant to try to limit the problems with that. All right, now the following map, you can see a diagram of the TVA here in green. In the red, we have various industrial sites. These are the hydroelectric plants to try to give water or hydropower to the different farms in the region. Again, this is a visual example of the TVA. Now, part of the relief aspect of the New Deal was in trying to get money to the American people, try to get money in their pockets. If the American people had more money, they would be willing to spend that money and thereby improve our economy on their own. And FDR and his advisors were very wary of giving out just handouts. They didn't want to give out government doles, so to speak, as FDR liked to call it. Rather than just give money away, what they wanted to do was really try to give jobs to the American people and allow them the opportunity to earn that money. So with different various temporary works programs like the Civil Works Administration, the Civilian Conservation Corps. There were a lot of different jobs for infrastructure, building of dams. There were a lot of murals that were contracted by the government to give artists, to give engineers, to give other workers an opportunity for work and to make money and to provide for the now, one of the things we want to note, and we're going to discuss this more in class, is some of the critics of the New Deal. The American Liberty League Townsend Plan were two different groups, Townsend actually being a person who created a plan, as well as Huey Long, who really sort of establishes the goal of the Share Our Wealth Society. You can really put Huey Long and Share Our Wealth Society in the same sort of category, but we're going to be looking at those in more depth in class. Now, one of the things that you need to do for me as we get ready for Tuesday is to focus on these two questions. And these are going to be our tickets in the door, which means you need to have them ready and handy to hand to me before you guys take your seats and get started on Tuesday. First, what is the definition of analyze? We've worked with this word, this task word, a lot. We're going to see it a lot on the AP exam. So as we start to review and prep for the AP exam oh wow, it's coming up quick. We want to make sure that you guys fully understand and grasp what that task word is asking you to do. And after you guys give me that definition in writing in complete sentences, I want you to ask this question and answer it in writing as well. Why is analysis an important skill for historians? All right, both those questions to be answered on a sheet of paper, turned in on Tuesday. All right, guys, we'll see you in class.